The snow is melting and flowers are blooming, which means we're about to have our moves determined by a bunch of grown men wearing pajamas attempting to hit a ball with a stick. And that means the offseason is over, rosters are almost finalized, and Scott Boras continues to have a year-long stare-off with GMs. So with that in mind, let's preview the American League teams in this video, and put them in tiers that can surely backfire in a few months.
Totally sports-esque. Major League.
We begin with the best division in baseball on paper, with the AL East. We start things north of the border with the Toronto Blue Jays. The Blue Jays snuck into the playoffs last year as the 6th seed, and were the team that helped the Twins snap the longest playoff losing streak in American sports history, and now own the longest playoff losing streak in baseball at 6. And despite the recent heartbreaks, Blue Jays fans were the happiest they've been since Jose Bautista flipped his bat when it appeared certain that Shohei Ohtani was a Blue Jay. But then, and something never seen before, the internet was wrong about something, and Shohei Ohtani went just about as far away from Toronto as he could. Despite missing out on paying $700 million for one player, they got the next best thing in Daniel Vogelbach, and they replaced Matt Chapman with the veteran Justin Turner. The Blue Jays were carried last year by their pitching that gave them the second best team ERA in the American League last year, and if Alex Manoah is able to return to where he was in 2022, then that could put them in the position to win the division. And more than that, they are counting on Vlad Guerrero Jr. to also have a bounce-back season, as though he is the face of the franchise and the face of MLB The Show. He finished 12th on the team in WAR last year, and players such as Bo Bichette, Alejandro Kirk, and George Springer continue with their normal production, then it will all come down to Vlad Jr. and Manoah making a comeback to pose a serious threat. They are projected by Fangraphs to finish 83 and 78, and they are in the disadvantage of playing in the AL East, but the division could possibly have 4 playoff teams. I'm putting the Blue Jays in the playoff contenders tier. We move to the defending AL East champions in the Baltimore Orioles. The Orioles went through one of the most extreme rebuilds in recent memories, going from 110 losses in 2021 to 101 wins in 2023. The Orioles look to have a great future coming into 2023, but no one expected them to win over 100 games. And that was brought along by the young talent they found at SEC frat houses in Adley Rutschman and the unanimous Rookie of the Year, Gunnar Henderson. But that inexperience and lack of serious pitching depth came back to bite them when they were swept by the eventual World Series champions in the ALDS. Despite the incredible season, the front office showed no signs of urgency, which is why fans were thrilled when the team was recently sold to David Rubenstein, and they capitalized on that excitement by trading for Corbin Burnes, addressing the biggest need for them, and they addressed another issue by signing Philly legend Craig Kimbrell. With the uncertain health of Felix Bautista, John Means, and Kyle Bradish, Corbin Burnes and Craig Kimbrell will play big roles on the team still relying on their young players. Like the Blue Jays, they are projected to finish 83 and 78. And things are different this year in the fact that expectations are high and there is now a target on their back. If young players are able to step up and they are able to stay healthy with Jackson Holliday bound to come up, this could be another big year. And just based on last year, I had to put them in the serious contenders tier. Up next is the Tampa Bay Rays. The Rays had a disappointing end to the season after a historic start, brought along by injuries and unfortunate timing on giveaways. The Rays traded Tyler Glasnow to the Dodgers and have already shown they can have success in spite of the time he missed developing the atomic bomb. And they've also shown that making a trade with them is almost always a bad move in the end, which means Ryan Pepiot and Johnny DeLuca will probably become all-stars, and Ryan Pepiot will join a rotation now led by Zach Eflin, as Shane McClanahan undergoes Tommy John surgery. Aaron Savali will probably have a bounce-back year, as Taj Bradley looks to prove himself, while Kevin Cash forces the bullpen to pitch 5 innings a game. Ahmed Rosario will also look to have a bounce-back year, as he looks to be the new shortstop. And the biggest thing for the Rays in 2023 was the rise of Yandy Diaz. If him and Randy Arozarena can have another similar year, the Rays should be in the thick of things once again, as 1/4 of the stadium cheers them on. They are projected to finish 86 and 76, and if they are able to stay healthy, their biggest setback in recent years, they should be in that range. I'm putting them in the playoff contender tier. Up next is the Boston Red Sox. The Red Sox are coming off another 78-win season that resulted in a last-place finish, ultimately costing Bloom his job, and many fans are disappointed in the lack of action the front office took during the offseason. The biggest move they made was signing Lucas Giolito to a 2-year, $38 million contract, and now he is on the DL with elbow problems. They also lost Alex Verdugo to the Yankees, and they lost Chris Sale, but they added Vaughn Grisham, Tyler O'Neill, and Liam Hendricks. The biggest reason fans are upset is they were expected to go after big-name free agents, but obviously, they didn't. The Red Sox were in the ALCS just 3 years ago, and have only gone downhill since, and it doesn't look like they'll be much better this year. On paper, their roster isn't horrible, but they unfortunately play in the toughest division in baseball, and they look to be the weakest team. They are projected to finish last again at 80 and 82, and it's easy to see them being worse than that. Maybe they'll perform better for the Netflix documentary about their season, but for now, I'm putting them in the mid category. And the last team in the AL East is the New York Yankees. As always, fans had huge expectations going into 2023, and they were disappointed. Things started out pretty good, but after the Judge injury, things went downhill. He did come back, but things didn't get better, as their offense struggled, with Anthony Rizzo dealing with injuries, while Giancarlo Stanton had the worst year of his career. Carlos Rodon's first year in New York was a disaster, with the only upside of the year being Garrett Cole winning the Cy Young. But they made one of the biggest moves of the offseason by trading for Juan Soto and receiving Trent Grisham in the trade as well. They also acquired Alex Verdugo and missed out on Yamamoto, but got the next best thing in Marcus Stroman. As of right now, Garrett Cole will miss time with an elbow problem, which makes signing Blake Snell very possible and, according to some, a must. This season will 100% come down to players staying healthy, and aside from the main players, if Rizzo, Stanton, Nestor, and Rodon have comeback years, it would be massive. Fangraphs projects them to win the division at 88-74, and it's easy to call them the favorites and a World Series contender. We move on to the division of pure juggernauts and the AL Central. We start with the Cleveland Guardians. The biggest news from Cleveland this offseason was the retirement of the team's 11-year manager, Terry Francona. And he's being replaced by a guy who got a ring because of his contributions to the Braves in 2021, Stephen Vogt. They're coming off a 76-86 season that landed them third in the worst division in baseball, something that comes to their benefit. The Guardians were very lacking in the power department as they finished last in home runs and second to last in slugging percentage. And despite having the least amount of team strikeouts for the second year in a row, they finished middle of the pack in team batting average, one of the few offensive categories they weren't below average in. And what hurt them the most was the decline in pitching brought along by numerous injuries that saw 11 different pitchers start at least 6 games. Team ERA and ERA plus rose, while they finished third to last in team strikeouts, and the additions of Noah Syndergaard and Lucas Giolito didn't do much to help. And they were pretty quiet in the offseason, as they often are. They brought back Carlos Carrasco on a minor league deal, and they added Ben Lively and Tyler Bede to their pitching depth, along with Scott Barlow in a trade. And they also gained Yankees outfielder Estevan Florial in a trade, and brought back another player and postseason legend, Austin Hedges. The team is almost bringing back the same team, and Fangraphs currently projects them to win 80 games. There's still a chance they trade their former Cy Young ace, Shane Bieber, but if Jose Ramirez continues what he does, and Steven Kwan and Andres Jimenez produce more than they did in 2023, as long as the staff is able to stay healthy, they have a chance to top the 80 mark. And the biggest thing they have going for them, like everyone else in the AL Central, is that they play in the AL Central. Because of that, I'm making a new tier called They're Lucky They Play in the AL Central, which means they have a chance to win the division, which will most likely be the only way to make the playoffs in that division, despite the expansion. And it would also be a surprise if any of these teams make a playoff run. And speaking of teams that probably won't make a playoff run, we move to the Kansas City Royals. The Royals are coming off one of the worst years in their history, and they tied the 2005 team for their worst winning percentage in the 21st century. They obviously weren't expected to be good, but then again, they weren't expected to compete with the A's for the worst record ever. But there was one huge bright spot in the year, and that's Bobby Witt Jr. He became the first Royal in history to join the 30-30 club, and was the first player ever to hit 30 home runs, steal 45 bases, and hit a league-leading 11 triples. To add excitement to the community as both the Chiefs and Royals look for funding for a new stadium, the Royals made one of the biggest moves of the offseason by signing Witt Jr. to an 11-year, $288.7 million contract, the largest in franchise history. But besides that, they did make a few moves to address the weak areas of the team, which is every area except shortstop. They signed Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo to add to the rotation, along with Chris Stratton in the bullpen. And they added Garrett Hampson, Hunter Renfroe, and Adam Frazier to the lineup. And they also made the massive move of signing Will Smith. The luckiest man ever became the first athlete in American sports to win 3 straight rings on 3 different teams. And well, by signing with the Royals, he ensured the streak will end there. Although, Aroldis Chapman said the same thing to start last year. The Royals actually had a pretty good offseason by their standards, and Fangraphs expects them to go 75-87, which would be a huge improvement and add excitement to a loyal fan base for the foreseeable future. Royals fans have to go into this year with low expectations, knowing the future has to look bright with Bobby Witt Jr. locked up for a long time, so for now, I'm putting them in the when does next year start category. Up next is the Detroit Tigers, a team that's seemingly been in a never-ending rebuild after a very disappointing 2022 with the additions of Javi Baez and Eduardo Rodriguez. 2023 was another rather disappointing season that resulted in a second-place finish in the worst division in baseball with 78 wins and cost Avila his job. The biggest thing the Tigers can take away from 2023 is the performance of some of their young players. After a rather disappointing rookie year, Spencer Torkelson hit 31 home runs in 2023 while having an .816 OPS in the second half. If he continues with his hot second half and lowers his K rate, it could be a big year for him. Parker Meadows showed promise in his 37 games last year, and Kerry Carpenter was perhaps the best player last year. And on the offensive side, the biggest thing for the Tigers is if Riley Green can stay healthy. He missed 99 games last year, but in the games he played, he led the team in F4 and could be the leader for the Tigers in years to come. While a veteran Mark Canha is a great addition to a young outfield, and Gio Urshela is another underrated signing with experience. As for the pitching, the Tigers signed Kenta Maeda and Jack Flaherty, both who are injury prone, but when healthy, can add a lot to a rather weak rotation outside of Tarek Skubal. The Tigers are a young team that, just like the Guardians, has the advantage of playing in the AL Central, and funny enough, Fangraphs projects them to have the same record as the Guardians at 80 and 82. This would be their best record in years, and is possible if young players step up and the more experienced players are able to stay healthy and consistent. I'm putting them in the same tier as the Guardians, though losing the speed of Miguel Cabrera could hurt them. Up next, we go to the defending AL Central champions and the Minnesota Twins. The Twins are coming off a great season that, as just mentioned, featured a division crown. And not just their first playoff series victory since 2002, also their first playoff win since 2002, to end the longest playoff losing streak in American sports history at 18. The Twins were actually under 500 at the All-Star break, but a great second half with the rise of 2017 number 1 overall pick, Royce Lewis, led them to the top of the AL Central. But the biggest key to their success was their pitching, led by Pablo Lopez and Sonny Gray, who both made the All-Star team, while Bailey Ober, Joe Ryan, and Kenta Maeda close out a very strong rotation. And adding Yohan Duran coming out of the bullpen, it's easy to see how they led the league in team strikeouts last year. But the Twins are losing a lot of key role players, such as contact king Joey Gallo, Donovan Solano, Kenta Maeda, Dallas Keuchel, Michael Taylor, and now Jorge Polanco, who was traded for Anthony Desclafani and others. And their biggest loss is Sonny Gray, who's heading to St. Louis after an all-star season. Just like the rest of the AL Central, the Twins had a quiet offseason, with their big moves being the additions of veterans Carlos Santana and Jay Jackson, along with the players from the Polanco trade, meaning the Twins are expecting a lot from the young guys, who showed a lot of promise, especially in the playoffs last year. And a huge factor could be if Byron Buxton is able to stay healthy, and Carlos Correa is able to have a bounce-back year after the worst offensive year of his career last year. The Twins are projected to go 85 and 77, and are the favorites to win the AL Central. A lot of this will be determined by how their pitching holds up after the loss of Gray, and if players are still healthy. It's easy to see them winning the division again, and if any team benefits from playing in the AL Central, it's the Minnesota Twins, who join the Tigers and Guardians in that category. And we finish with what looks to be the worst team in the worst division, in the Chicago White Sox. After winning the division in 2021, the future looked great with a young, talented roster, led by a man 4 times the average age of the players. But after a disappointing 2022, 2023 managed to somehow be an even more disappointing year. Only the Oakland A's had a worse OPS, and outside of Dylan Cease, pitchers dealt with injuries and terrible performance that resulted in a 4.87 team ERA. They went from a serious contender to a team in rebuilding mode in the span of 2 years. And as Dylan Cease was finally traded, it's pretty obvious. And it's also seen in the trade that sent reliever Aaron Bummer to the Braves in exchange for Nicky Lopez, Michael Soroka, Braden Shoemake, and Jared Shuster, giving the Braves assurance in the bullpen, while the White Sox look to replace Tim Anderson after a horrid year, while Soroka and Shuster will make their way into a weak rotation. They also add the likes of Paul DeYoung, Eric Fed, Jesse Chavez, and Mike Moustakas. So this was the offseason of a team that knows they have a lot of problems, and the only upside is they have a few pieces ready to trade to set up pieces for the future. Fangraphs projects them to have the worst record in the AL, so obviously, they're in the wins next year tier. And we move to our final division in the AL, and the AL West. We begin with the team that's ruled over the division and may have lost their title as the most hated team in baseball with the events of the offseason, and that's the Houston Astros. For the 6th time in the last 7 years, the Astros won the AL West. This in a season that went down to the wire and saw them take the title from their in-state rival, the Texas Rangers. But they got the last laugh when they beat the Astros in 7 games in the ALCS. Despite another division title, this was their worst record since the last year they missed the playoffs, which was in 2016. Kyle Tucker finished 5th in MVP voting, while Yordan Alvarez finished 13th despite missing a quarter of the season. The 2 position players remaining from 2017 and Alex Bregman and Jose Altuve had another typical season, and this offseason they locked the face of their franchise into a 5-year, $125 million extension. And with much of their core returning, they made one of the biggest moves of the offseason by signing Josh Hader to a 5-year, $95 million contract, adding Hader to one of the best back-end bullpens in the league with Brian Abreu and Ryan Presley. And Hader becomes very important with the departure of bullpen pieces in Hector Neris, Ryan Stanek, and Phil Maton, which could become a huge factor as the season drags on. The Astros are projected to win 91 games, the most in the AL, and are the favorites to win the division again. And if Yordan stays healthy for a full year, he could become a serious MVP candidate. And their depth and experience probably means they aren't going away, and they remain a World Series contender. Up next, we go to the Los Angeles Angels. If you haven't heard, a certain generational player will not be with the Angels this year, and that's Brett Phillips. But another one is Shohei Ohtani, who shockingly didn't want to remain in this organization. The Angels were still barely in contention at the trade deadline, and decided to be buyers instead of sellers. And in typical Angels fashion, their moves backfired, as they finished the season 17-38 while dealing with numerous injuries, including Anthony Rendon, who strained his ability to carry. The biggest move the Angels made this offseason was hiring the veteran Ron Washington as manager. Besides that, they tried to strengthen their weak bullpen by adding Robert Stevenson and adding more pitching depth with Matt Moore, Zach Plesac, and Adam Simber, while adding a few experienced batters like Willie Calhoun, Aaron Hicks, Hunter Dozier, and Jake Marisnick. Angels fans can't be excited going to this season and should be downright disappointed, but who knows, maybe Ohtani was a giant distraction, and Mike Trout can remain healthy, while Reed Detmers could have a real breakout year, as Anthony Rendon watches from the clubhouse on his phone. They're projected to win 77 games and can only hope they finish better than the A's, so I'll put them in the mid category. Up next, we go to the Seattle Mariners. Having high hopes coming into 2023, they started disappointing but got hot in August, going 21-6, but dropped off in September, going 11-17, to be the odd man out in the three-team race in the AL West. The Mariners had an interesting offseason that excited and infuriated fans. It started with the trade of Jarred Kelenic to the Braves, and the most Mariners thing ever has happened, as both the pitchers they got back in the deal are undergoing Tommy John surgery. But aside from this, they traded Eugenio Suarez to the Diamondbacks while adding Luis Urias. They also signed World Series champ Mitch Garver and brought back Mitch Haniger in the Robbie Ray trade. That ended with the Mariners trading Anthony DeSclafani, Justin Topa, and Gabriel Gonzalez for Jorge Polanco. Despite the heartbreaking finish last year, the Mariners look like they can easily contend for the division again this year, if the Mitches can stay healthy and produce while Julio Rodriguez continues to do what he does. Considering they're coming off a year with the best team ERA in the AL, Mariners fans should cautiously get their hopes up. The only problem is, they are in a division with the last two World Series champions, but I can still see them competing for the division and remaining a playoff contender. And now we move to the defending champions in the Texas Rangers. It was a dream season for the Rangers after decades of pain, and was surprising in many ways. Though they made huge signings with Corey Seager and Jacob deGrom, after deGrom was injured and the Rangers blew a chance at the division title, a deep playoff run seemed far-fetched. But then they started playing Creed and went 11-0 on the road to win their first World Series. And in the offseason for the Rangers, the only thing notable was what they lost. There's the midseason pickup in Jordan Montgomery, who is being held hostage by Scott Boras and is likely not returning, and there's Aroldis Chapman, Mitch Garver, Martin Perez, and the ultimate good luck charm in Will Smith. But they did make a few additions such as Kirby Yates, David Robertson, and Tyler Mollett. Fangraphs only has them winning 82 games this year, which is really surprising considering they are returning one of the best lineups in baseball. And if deGrom or Scherzer can come back and stay healthy, they can impact a solid rotation, though there are concerns in the bullpen. I definitely think they surpassed projections, and just based on what they did last year with the added experience of their young players, there's no way I can't put them as a World Series contender. And we finish in the AL West and in the American League with the saddest story in baseball with the Oakland Athletics. The once proud franchise is not even sure where they'll be playing in the years to come, as fans continue to boycott for good reason. The only bright spot from another 100-loss season was Zach Geloff, who compiled an .840 OPS with 14 home runs and a 2.6 WAR in just 69 games last year. This entire roster is full of young players and role players such as Brent Rooker, who hit 30 home runs last season. The only thing the A's can do now is try to build for a future that looks far from bright, that could take place in Oakland, Vegas, Salt Lake City, or even hell for all we know. You have to feel very bad for the dedicated A's fans who have been there since the beginning and are still there, as another historically bad season looks to be underway. And for that, we have to create a special tier for the A's by putting them under the 50 feet of crap tier, then putting them in the Then There's Us tier, with John Fisher even lower in the Sell the Team tier. So that finishes the preseason tier rankings for the American League. No doubt that one of these teams will come out of nowhere to make me look foolish, while others will do just as expected to make me look like a genius. So stick around for the National League tier rankings coming out in a few days.